Zetland FM, it's 28 minutes to 11 now. 2 months ago, in fact, we're just now talking about 7 weeks ago, Cleveland got a new Police and Crime Commissioner. Conservative candidate Steve Turner swept to victory, pledging more police, safer streets. But 2 months into the role, how is he finding it? Well, let's ask him, shall we? Joining me in the studio is indeed Cleveland's Police and Crime Commissioner, Steve Turner. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Dave.
Right, let's cut to the chase. How's it going so far?
Really good. Really enjoying it. Lots of work to do. Lots of people to meet. Lots of things to start putting in place. But I've got a great team around me. Mm-hmm. And it's looking good. And I'm really positive about it. I was positive before I took the role. Thought I could make a big difference. And now I've seen it and now I'm starting to get into it. I know I can really make an impact here for us.
I mean, for people who don't know, what is the role? They see police and crime and they think, oh, you can get loads of bobbies on the beat and you can do this and you can do that. What exactly is the role of the police and crime
I think the biggest myth is the fact that the police and crime commission is going to be able to put extra bobbies on a beat on a Friday night in Redcar, and it doesn't work like that. We have no operational powers whatsoever. That's entirely within the remit of the Chief Constable. But what we're tasked with is providing an efficient and effective police force, and you do that firstly through your Chief Constable, holding your Chief Constable to account. When need arises, hiring or firing a Chief Constable, where if that happens to be what's needed. In Cleveland, fortunately, it isn't. We've got a great Chief Constable in Richard Lewis. And after that, it's about setting the strategy. So whilst I can't say we need more bobbies on the streets in Redcar on a Friday night, what I can say is, look, we've got a real antisocial behaviour problem in X area on a Friday night. What are we doing about it? And then the other thing we do is, where residents come and aren't happy with the service they're providing, I'm their first port of call. So I am the resident's voice within Cleveland Police.
So you've had a look. I mean, obviously, when you went into the role, you had an idea what you thought might need to be dealt with. But I mean, 7 weeks in, I mean, what do you think needs to be done? What are your priorities?
My priorities are ensuring we are able to release officers into our neighbourhood teams, so increasing our neighbourhood team capacity, looking at how we use technology. And how that can provide a better service for our residents. We've got massive problems with drugs on our streets across Cleveland. We are one of the most violent places for organised crime gangs in the country, and we've got a grip of that. And we've had the Home Secretary literally just a few hundred yards up the road from here a couple of weeks ago, and I've had the Policing Minister up and took him to Parliament Road in Middlesbrough as well. So we've really pitched our case for some support from the government for that, to really get a grip on violent crime. And then after that, we've got to look underneath the service and sort of say, one of the things the Police and Crime Commissioner does is provide services for victims. So our Victims Care and Advice Service is out for tender at the moment.
Now you've actually asked, you've launched a survey about that, didn't you? Now we have Dave Meaden from Victim Care and Advice Service regularly, and he's brilliant and gives us great advice. So what is the state of play with the Victim Care and Advice Service, and why did you launch that survey?
So I think the first thing, the survey we're talking about is the Violence Against Women and Girls survey that we did recently. Now, that will facilitate our bid for funding from the government, and it's aimed at providing things that will help women and girls feel safer, predominantly around the nighttime economy across our area. And that's the third tranche of funding available from the government for things like street lighting, cameras. In Safer Streets 1, we spent money on alley gate locks, home protection packs and things like that. So there's all sorts we can build within those funding bids. In terms of the Victim Care and Advice Service, I know Dave quite well, and he's great at what he does. And hopefully I'm seeing him later on today as well. But what we're looking to do with that service has just naturally come to the end of its tender, so it's out for tender. There's no decision on mine made to sort of say, right, we're going to change what we do here. It was naturally up, but it is my job to make sure that the service we commission next is fit for the future. And crime is changing, cybercrime is become more prevalent during COVID. There are a lot more people that are using the internet now, that more elderly people that maybe didn't use the internet previously. So there's some support there that we need to give to people in different ways to maybe what we've done in the past. Now, Dave and his team are brilliant, and I sincerely hope they're still with us in a few months' time when that tender process is finished. And I have no reason to doubt that they won't be, because what they do is fantastic. It's just about building the service that's fit for the residents of Cleveland for the future years.
Okay. The force then, Cleveland Police, it's had a bit of a checkered recent past, I think that's fair to say. There's been inspections which haven't exactly been ringing endorsements. I mean, what in your view, what are the sort of strong points and the failings, either end of the spectrum?
I think the strongest thing we've got is our people. So, and those grassroots officers that you see day in, day out, are Cleveland's strength. Our officers, it doesn't matter where you go, whether it's Durham, Northumbria, or further afield, the boots on the ground, those bobbies we see day in, day out are brilliant, and they do a fantastic job for our residents. What they haven't been over the last 5 to 10 years, he's led in the right way. We've had lots of problems further up the chain within Cleveland Police. Those are well documented, but we do a lot of good things as well, and those good things aren't seen. And one of the things I've been really keen to do since I started this role 2 months ago is to push out the good stuff we are doing. We are catching criminals, we are taking drugs off the streets, we are finding missing and vulnerable people on a regular basis, and we've got to shout about that, because that's what we do. But I do understand that it's very easy to be a resident in Cleveland right now and not have faith in your police force.
I was just about to say, I mean, why should the public trust a force that has been, pulled through the mill, really? I mean, it hasn't had the best.
It hasn't, and nobody shied away from that, and I talked about that throughout my campaign. And we accept it, and I think the leadership of the force accepts that where we were wasn't good enough, and we've got to do that now. That's been very public in the Peel report, and we are inadequate in a number of areas, and that's got to change. And the plan the Chief Constable and his senior team have put in place looks good. I think we can do that. What I need to do is make sure it's more than just words on paper. Make sure it's actually happening, and I do that by asking the questions, by scrutinising, by getting under the surface of the detail. So they can tell me, operationally we're doing X, Y, Z, but then if I visit a police station the following morning and those officers on the ground say, don't know what you're talking about, Gov, right, then that's when I have to go back and ask different questions, and that's what's important in my role. You can be told one thing by officers and another thing by senior officers, and thankfully I haven't come across that yet. But I am aware that it has happened in the past. I talked to a number of police constables that tell me that the inspection report was no surprise. Yet at the time, a number of senior leaders within Cleveland Police were saying, we didn't expect this. And that discord is something I'm keen to make sure it doesn't happen again.
I mean, you mentioned the current Chief Constable, Richard Lewis. I mean, what's your relationship like with him? You only known him. Well, I suppose you'll have known him as a councillor before, but you've only sort of had proper dealings with him recently.
Yeah, I think I did know him in my previous role. I'd had a number of meetings with him on a formal basis, and since then I've got to know him a little bit better and understand. And I think the key thing for what Richard's done is, for all he rightly takes a lot of plaudits, he will say himself that it is down to the team that he's building and down to the officers. So the traction we've got is a bit of momentum now. Right, and he's built that, and like I said in his blog just this week, he's saying thank you to the officers that have made those improvements, that those small steps we've made already to go forward. And whilst that is down to Richard, it's down to the team he's built, because you are only as good as the people you are. So if touch wood, and he doesn't, if Richard got run over by a bus tomorrow, I am sure that we're in a much better place than we were to be able to carry on that work he's put in place.
Okay. You mentioned when you swept to victory, which you did indeed. I mean, you mentioned more police, safer streets. I mean, more police. It's quite wide-ranging. Doesn't that cost money?
It does. The government's already investing, so we've got a police uplift programme.
Is it investing enough?
I think it is. I think it is. I think what it will take us to by the end of next year, because we front loaded in Cleveland, so all those extra officers that we were due over the next 4 years, we're bringing in over 2.
Okay.
So by the end of next year, we'll be at about just shy of 1,500 officers, which isn't a million miles away from where we've been in the past. But I think more importantly for me, one of the things I'm working on and one of the things I'm scrutinising is historically we've had really high levels of sickness in Cleveland Police. So we've got to look at the welfare of our officers and see what we're doing to make sure that we keep as many officers on the front line as we can, as often as we can. And we've got officers, frontline officers, warranted officers, doing desk jobs. And doing things. Now, some of those are legitimate and some of those need to be officers, but others, they're just filling in where we've got gaps, and we need to address that recruitment process, whether that's in our control room or whether that's in some of our back office functions. So I think at any given time, anything up to 20% of our officers, of our established warranted officers, aren't working on the front line. And if you put that into numbers, of those 1,500 officers, the best part of 300 of them the public will never see. And we've got to make sure we get the balance right between the roles they need to do and need an officer in charge of, and the roles we could get civilian staff to do. That frees up those officers back on the front line. You then look at things like the Historical Investigation Unit, which is doing a fantastic job at the minute, but that's taking some really experienced officers away from frontline work, and we're maybe not getting the things done today that we need to get done today because we've got all of our experience in other areas. So those things have been challenged and been questioned and been looked at, to be fair.
Okay. You mentioned a few things that you've mentioned. So you've said we will come down hard on drugs. Now I know that's a big thing that you want to sort out. I mean, how do you do that? How do you come down hard on drugs?
I think the first and foremost, if in the week I started, I was invited on a raid. As part of Operation Endeavour.
They're interesting, aren't they? I've done a few of those.
They are interesting. So to see that, and don't wrong, the local chief inspector that was leading it was panicking. Keep the commissioner away. Don't let him near this, and it was fine. There was no danger. The officers were brilliant, and that kicked off Op Endeavour, and what that's managed to do in a 4-week period is take over £2 million worth of drugs off the street. Now, that's just a number. If we're talking about football players, it doesn't buy you a right arm these days. But to put that in perspective, that's 200,000 drug deals that we've stopped across Cleveland. And if every one of those drug deals is a potential death, because it is, that's an awful lot of public protection we've done in just 4 weeks. And by disrupting that supply, by arresting, I mean, there's over 130 arrests. We've taken tens of thousands of pounds worth of cash. We've taken weapons off the streets, drugs. We've protected vulnerable people. We've picked up some people that were probably going to get dragged into county lines work, where we're getting young people that have been used as money mules and as drug mules. And that comes from one operation. Now, what we've got to do is we've got to work out a way of building that type of operation into our day-to-day business as usual, because that takes a lot of time, a lot of effort and a lot of coordination. And that's something myself and the Chief Constable are working on, and that's why we had the Home Secretary up. That's why we had the Policing Minister up. We're looking to build a violence reduction unit that does that top-line stuff, but then underneath that does all of the divert work, so working with young people in schools, sort of saying, this isn't the avenue for you, and if you get approached in this way, this is who you should talk to, and this is why you shouldn't get involved. But it does start at the top, because how can you convince little Johnny he shouldn't get into drugs like his uncle does, when his uncle's driving around in a big flash car, has always got cash and a Rolex on his wrist, and nobody ever stops him? So we've got to arrest his uncle. We've got to make his uncle's life difficult, and where possible, we've got to put him behind bars, because then that gives us the message to send to young people that just says, you know what, crime doesn't really pay. Because right now, too many young people in Cleveland think crime does pay, because we're not doing that stuff at the top. So we'll do the diversionary work. We'll help addicts. We'll help people not get into that life of crime. And to do that starts with showing them that life of crime, you are going to get caught and you are going to get put away.
Okay. I mean, you mentioned addicts there. There was a little bit of a controversy, in inverted commas, about the methadone.
The HAT program.
Yeah, the HAT. Yeah. If you can just fill us in what that was all about.
So basically, the HAT programme was a programme running in Middlesbrough, and it was a trial, and it was initially funded by the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and it took 14 addicts originally and put them on a programme of effectively giving them medical grade heroin each day. Right, so they didn't have to steal to buy it. They weren't buying street heroin. It wasn't as dangerous as it could be if they were buying them from member. Now, throughout that programme, it's now got about 8 people left on it. It's been fantastic for those 8 people. They no longer go out to commit crimes to feed their habit. They no longer use street heroin. They are still addicted to heroin. They still do need that drug every single day. And the people that are working with them have seen fantastic improvements. So in terms of, has it worked for those 8 people? Absolutely, it's worked for those 8 people, and I'm pleased to say it's done that. For me, though, what it hasn't done is disrupted the sale or supply of drugs in Cleveland, and that's my priority.
Right.
And we've got to do that. But what I said from day one was I would look to seek alternative funding for that programme. It wasn't about just scrapping the programme and saying get lost. And we've done that. So there'll be an announcement, a formal announcement later this week. But I brought it up, I launched it at my police and crime panel meeting last night. We have secured additional funding for the heroin assisted treatment funding. So when the contract with us runs out in September, it will be picked up and it will be funded by other agencies. So that the programme I haven't cancelled the programme. I haven't scrapped it. I said from day one I would seek alternative funding for it, and we've done that, and we've secured that alternative funding, and that will see it go through to March next year, where Teesside University will need to do a fuller analysis on it, because one of the things we have to address, and it's controversial, and not everybody agrees, but if we're spending £300,000 plus on 8 individuals, how does that benefit the vast majority of the public in Cleveland? And that's a public health issue, and those people need public health support. That's not a police and crime commissioner issue, and that's been my argument from day one.
Okay. It's an interesting role, isn't it? You've come into this and you've got so many balls to keep in the air at the same time. Other things, I mean, you mentioned young people with the reference to drugs there, but antisocial behaviour is a big... is a big bugbear of everybody, isn't it? I mean, where do we start with that?
We start by reporting it. One of the big things that came across when I was talking to members of the public throughout the campaign is people have stopped reporting crime because they feel it's pointless. And I understand that. If you report antisocial behaviour in the street you live in, the chances of you getting a police officer attending at that point in time to stop that antisocial behaviour is going to be slim. He's going to be slim. It's not always going to happen. What it does do, though, is it allows us to build up a picture. So if you take somewhere like Trimden Shops in Middlesbrough, there were constant problems on weekend evenings with that. Kids hanging around, intimidation, there was violence going on there was all sorts. That consistent approach by those residents to continue reporting that allowed the police to gather enough evidence to put dispersal orders in place, to target particular individuals who were ringleaders of that, if you like. And we can only do that with the support of the public. So stopping antisocial behaviour starts with people reporting every single thing they see. Now, whether that's through 101, whether it's through Crime Stoppers, which is completely anonymous, or whether it's going to be through the app that we're developing within my office to allow people to report crime directly through their smartphone on an app basis. But that's our starting point. After that, we need to look at how we use technology, GPS tagging to stop inquisitive crime, repeat offenders, DNA spray to target off-road motorbike users, drones to target off-road motorbikes, drones to highlight where we've got specific problems, whether that's large gatherings or things like that, where we can direct officers on the ground. And we're seeing a lot of traction with that at the minute. We've got more drones on order, so there's more drones coming down the line as well.
21st century, aren't we?
We need to be. We've got 21st century problems, so we need 21st century solutions.
Absolutely. Another thing, I mean, you mentioned community and the importance of the community getting involved. What about knife crime as well? I mean, we've got Teresa Cave in Redcar, who's very, passionate, getting the message across, anti-knife crime. I mean, where do we stand on that?
That was a big pitch of mine to the Home Secretary. Knife crime in Redcar in Cleveland is up there with the worst in the country. Now, where it's slightly different to some of the metropolitan areas is a lot of our night crime comes from organised crime gangs. So the horrendous stories you see, the machete-wielding idiots in Borough and Stockton, places like that, for example, that's around organised crime. However, we have an increasing problem with young people carrying knives, and that's where people like Teresa come into their own. I've been talking to Teresa pretty much constantly, both before I took this role and after I took this role. We're working on some programs that she can run, and my office supporting her to run those programs, taking referrals from young people that are caught with knives but haven't necessarily used them. And we're talking very young people. We're talking children as young as 10 or 11 sometimes, and being able to sort of get them into a program that educates them out of becoming those people that carry knives and with the intent to use them. Most young people that carry knives have no idea how to use them, have no idea what they're going to do, and are more likely to have that knife used against them. And that's the message we've got to get across into our schools and clubs. Education, a lot of education. Yeah, okay. Steve, unfortunately, time is racing away with us, so we're going to have to wrap up. I'm afraid we'll have you in again if you don't mind coming in. By all means, anytime you like. Local gentleman. So it was nice to have a lie in and come here first. My first appointment today, so it was good. Good stuff. So finally, what message do you want to? You're 7 weeks in, many more weeks to come. What message do you want to get out there to people who are listening to this today? We've got a great base. We've got fantastic officers in Cleveland Police. And I just need your help to help me put the pride back into Cleveland Police, because we can do it. We can become one of the best forces in the country. And I know we've got the team to do that in Cleveland. And we can do it. You can keep in touch with you via your Facebook page. But you can get... My Facebook page is open. People can contact me through that. They can contact me through the PCC's office, either at steve.turner@cleveland.police.uk or at pcc.cleveland.police.uk. Okay. And finally, is football coming home, do you think? Absolutely, football's coming home. Looking forward to it. I'll have him on tomorrow if it doesn't work out. Steve, thanks for coming in. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me.